Have you ever wondered why someone who can only hold their breath for 1 or 2 minutes can sometimes reach 3, 4, or even 5 minutes after only a few rounds of practice? Does that mean they suddenly became an advanced freediver? Of course not. And that is exactly why breath hold time can be misleading. I have worked with more than 300 students while observing their breath hold time, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and recovery. One thing becomes very clear. For many beginners, the biggest limitation is not simply how much oxygen they have. It is how their brain and body respond to rising carbon dioxide, discomfort, tension, and the urge to breathe. So instead of starting with complicated theory, let's begin with a simple experiment. Sit or lie down somewhere safe. Relax. Take a comfortable breath. You do not need to fill your lungs completely. For this kind of static CO2 practice, roughly 80% of your comfortable full inhalation is enough. Then hold your breath. But do not fight. Do not stare at the clock. Wait until the urge to breathe becomes obvious and you begin to feel moderately uncomfortable. When you reach the point where you really do not feel like continuing, end the hold. For one person, that might be 50 seconds. For another, it might be 90 seconds. For someone else, 2 minutes. The number is not the important part. The sensation is. Now breathe normally and recover. For this exercise, around 1 minute of rest works very well. I generally would not make it shorter than about 30 seconds. Then repeat the breath hold, and repeat again. If improvement comes slowly, do not solve the problem by forcing one extremely long hold. Add another controlled round. Use repetition instead of suffering. This is the basic idea behind what I call static CO2 stacking. During every breath hold, your body continues producing carbon dioxide. CO2 rises. Oxygen gradually falls. When you breathe again, oxygen saturation can recover relatively quickly. But the physiological effects associated with the CO2 accumulated during the previous hold do not disappear instantly. If you rest briefly and begin another hold, you are not necessarily starting from exactly the same internal condition as the first round. Then you repeat. Hold, recover. Hold again, recover. Over several rounds, you repeatedly expose yourself to the sensations associated with higher CO2. That repeated exposure is the point. We are not trying to make oxygen dangerously low. We are not training to see how low the number on a pulse oximeter can go. We are training the body and brain to become more familiar with CO2-related discomfort. This is also why resting too long changes the exercise. If you recover for many minutes, much more of that accumulated CO2-related state disappears. After a long enough rest, you are much closer to starting over. So for this specific CO2 stacking exercise, I like a short recovery, often around 1 minute. Now, textbooks often tell us that the urge to breathe is mainly driven by carbon dioxide. That is useful, but it can easily become oversimplified. Try comparing two situations. First, inhale and hold your breath. Then, on another attempt, exhale and hold your breath. You are still sitting there. You are not suddenly running. Your muscles are not doing dramatically more work. But the two breath holds can feel completely different. Why? Because the urge to breathe is not one simple CO2 number. Lung volume changes, oxygen reserve changes, mechanical feedback from the lungs and chest changes. The diaphragm and respiratory muscles are involved. Chemoreceptors are involved. Your brain integrates multiple signals. CO2 is extremely important, but it is part of a system. This is why I like comparing breath hold discomfort to eating chili peppers. Imagine someone who rarely eats spicy food. A small amount of chili can feel extremely intense. Someone who regularly eats spicy food may experience the same chili very differently. The chili is still there. What changed? The response to it. Breath hold training has a similar psychological and physiological component. The discomfort is real, but repeated controlled exposure can change how strongly you react to that discomfort. Instead of immediately thinking, "I have to breathe," you begin to recognize the sensation. You observe it. You know what is happening. And because you understand it, you may remain calm for longer. That calmness matters enormously. During a breath hold, oxygen is being consumed and CO2 is rising. Your cardiovascular system is also responding. Blood flow changes. Peripheral blood vessels can constrict. Blood can be preferentially redistributed toward vital organs. Heart rate may decrease. The brain, heart, lungs, blood vessels, respiratory muscles, and nervous system are all interacting. This is where the mammalian diving response, or MDR, becomes relevant. Humans share some diving response mechanisms with other mammals. Marine mammals such as dolphins and whales have extraordinary adaptations for life underwater. Humans are obviously nowhere near that level, but we still have physiological responses that can help conserve oxygen. One important part of breath hold preparation is therefore not getting excited and filling yourself with air. It is becoming calm. Before the hold, I want the nervous system moving toward a relaxed state. One simple tool is slow breathing, especially a slow exhale. For example, inhale comfortably, stay relaxed, and allow the exhale to last roughly 6 to 8 seconds. Do not force it. The exact number is not magic. The important idea is that the exhalation is slow, controlled, and relaxed. This helps shift the body toward parasympathetic dominance. Heart rate can settle. Muscle tension can decrease. The mind becomes quieter. But there is a major distinction here. Slow breathing is not the same thing as hyperventilation. Do not aggressively overbreathe before a breath hold. The goal is relaxation, not artificially removing as much CO2 as possible. And beginners do not need to inhale until the chest is completely full and tense. For CO2 table practice, a comfortable inhalation around 80% can be enough. If your shoulders rise, your neck becomes tense, and your chest feels like it is under pressure, you may have created unnecessary tension before the hold even begins. Once you start holding your breath, turn your attention inward. Relax your face. Relax your jaw. Relax your neck. Relax your shoulders. Relax your hands. Relax your abdomen. Feel your heartbeat. Sometimes I tell students to talk to themselves internally. Slow down. Relax. There is nothing you need to prove. Then close your eyes and wait. Eventually the urge to breathe appears. When it comes, do not immediately fight it. Notice it. You can even smile at it. Observe how the discomfort gradually increases. At some point, the diaphragm and other respiratory muscles may begin to contract. For an experienced practitioner, these contractions do not automatically mean panic. Allow them to happen while trying to remain relaxed. There is no need to create a perfect contraction rhythm. But this is extremely important. The purpose of static CO2 stacking is not to stay until you're suffering badly. If you are extremely uncomfortable and desperately forcing yourself to continue, you have changed the nature of the exercise. For beginners especially, I want controlled discomfort, not a battle. Then comes recovery breathing. Recovery is not an afterthought. It is part of the skill. When you end the hold, establish a consistent recovery breathing habit. Restore ventilation. Allow oxygen saturation to recover. Let heart rate stabilize. Then decide whether the next round is appropriate. A pulse oximeter can be useful here, especially one that records continuously through Bluetooth, or if a camera records the display. But I prefer the person doing the breath hold, not to stare at the numbers. Record first. Analyze afterward. During the hold, pay attention to your body. After the session, look at heart rate, oxygen saturation, how quickly oxygen fell and how quickly it recovered. Those trends can be useful, but a pulse oximeter is not a permission slip to push harder, and there is no single SpO2 number at which every person will black out. Consumer devices also have measurement delay and limitations. Blackout is not a game, and it is not a training target. You should never think, how low can I make my oxygen go? That is the wrong objective. The objective of this exercise is CO2 adaptation while maintaining sensible oxygen recovery. This brings us to maximum breath hold attempts. For beginners, I do not think maximum static attempts need to be regular training. You can make substantial progress with controlled static CO2 practice. If you are going to attempt a true maximum, you need proper supervision. A competent buddy should be watching you. Never treat a maximum breath hold as something to casually test alone. If I have someone perform several CO2 rounds and later want to observe a longer supervised attempt, I may give them a longer recovery first, around 3 minutes, for example. That is different from the 1-minute recovery used for CO2 stacking. The short recovery serves one purpose. The longer recovery, before a maximum test, serves another. And I generally would not wait excessively long if I am specifically interested in observing the effect of the preceding CO2 work. Now we need to talk about training time. How long should each CO2 table hold be? For a beginner, I prefer a sensation-based approach. Wait until the urge to breathe is clearly present and the hold becomes somewhat uncomfortable. When you feel that you genuinely do not want to continue much longer, that can be a useful starting point. Do not worry if it is only 50 seconds. Do not become proud because it is 2 minutes. The number is not your identity. For a more experienced practitioner, a coach can use a supervised static test together with heart rate, oxygen saturation, and recovery behavior to establish a more individualized training rhythm. A rough reference can be around 70% of a longer static time. For example, imagine a student whose maximum static is 3 minutes. That is 180 seconds. Around 70% is approximately 125 seconds. That is about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Instead of repeatedly trying to survive 3-minute holds, this person might train around 2 minutes and 5 seconds and repeat controlled rounds. That is a much more useful training idea than constantly chasing a personal best, and this brings us to a question I hear all the time. If someone reaches a 4-minute static breath hold after a relatively small amount of training, and 4 minutes is part of some freediving instructor requirements, did that beginner suddenly become better than an instructor? Obviously not. Static time is one measurement. Freediving ability is a network. An instructor needs water skills, safety knowledge, rescue ability, equalization, movement efficiency, judgment, communication, experience, and the ability to protect another diver. A big static number does not replace any of those things. This becomes very obvious when beginners enter the water. Someone may hold their breath for 3 minutes on land and suddenly feel a strong urge to breathe much earlier underwater. Why? Because on land, during static apnea, you are doing almost nothing. Underwater, you are working. Your muscles consume oxygen, movement produces more CO2, an inefficient duck dive wastes energy, poor finning wastes energy, weak or poorly coordinated kicking muscles waste energy, bad streamlining increases drag, fighting the water wastes energy, inefficient equalization can create unnecessary effort, cold can affect you, and mental tension can increase oxygen consumption even more. This is why movement efficiency matters so much. During exercise, muscles are metabolically active. They consume more oxygen and produce more carbon dioxide. As CO2 rises more quickly, the brain receives stronger respiratory signals. At the same time, oxygen is being used more rapidly. So if your underwater technique is inefficient, simply adding another minute to your land static may not solve the real problem. You may get better results by improving your duck dive, or your finning, or your streamline, or your equalization, or simply learning how to relax in the water. This is also why I do not want beginners becoming obsessed with land breath hold numbers. Land static should improve alongside your other freediving skills, according to what you actually need. Otherwise, you can spend enormous amounts of time chasing a number that does not transfer efficiently to the water. Then you become frustrated. You think you are bad at freediving, you lose motivation, and eventually you stop training. Freediving has a strong use it or lose it component. CO2 tolerance can decline, relaxation habits can decline, technique can decline. Your diving response may become less pronounced when you are no longer regularly exposed to the training environment, so the best training system is not the one that produces the biggest number tomorrow. It is the one you can maintain. General cardiovascular fitness can also help. Easy running, for example, can improve your aerobic conditioning before you demand more from your freediving. But I would not finish a hard run with a racing heart, and immediately treat that as the ideal moment for static breath hold training. For static work, I want the body calm. As a practical reference, if your heart rate is still very elevated, let it settle. And again, do not deliberately chase low oxygen saturation. Improve the cardiovascular system, improve movement efficiency, improve relaxation, and then let breath hold ability develop alongside those things. For more advanced CO2 practice, preparation becomes even more important. Avoid training immediately after a heavy meal. Settle the body, control the breath, use the slow exhale. Do not hyperventilate. Do not overfill the lungs. Talk to yourself. Relax every muscle you can. Wait for the breathing urge. Observe it rather than fear it. If contractions appear, stay relaxed. But do not turn the exercise into extreme suffering. Then recover properly. Repeat. That is the pattern. Relax. Hold. Observe. Recover. Repeat. The simplified version of everything I have explained is actually very short. Number 1. Do not force the hold. Number 2. Do not make the recovery unnecessarily long when your goal is static CO2 stacking. Around 1 minute is a useful working reference. Number 3. If progress is slow, use more controlled repetitions instead of one brutal attempt. Number 4. Allow oxygen to recover appropriately. Do not chase low SpO2. The goal is to gradually become more comfortable with elevated CO2. And finally, understand that freediving knowledge works like a neural network in the brain. Breathing connects to physiology. Physiology connects to the nervous system. The nervous system connects to relaxation. Relaxation connects to heart rate. Heart rate connects to oxygen consumption. Oxygen consumption connects to movement. Movement connects to technique. Technique connects to streamlining, finning, equalization, and efficiency. Psychology connects to all of them. Safety connects to everything. Environment connects to everything. Training connects the whole system through repetition. And experience teaches you how those connections actually behave in the real world. That is why I do not want you to judge yourself by one breath hold number. A 4-minute static does not automatically make you a great freediver. A shorter static does not automatically make you a poor freediver. The goal is to build the entire network. Understand your body, improve your technique, become more efficient, become calmer, train consistently, respect your limits, use proper supervision when risk increases, and let longer breath hold times become a consequence of better adaptation rather than the only objective. The best freediver is not simply the person who can suffer the longest. It is the person who understands what is happening, uses oxygen efficiently, remains calm, makes good decisions, and comes back safely. That is the system I want you to learn.